There's a narrative going on around that says that women didn't have a lot of protections in the past, and that a lot of the laws and new ways of thinking actually are better than the old. Uh, I find it better to like learn the actual facts and then decide for yourself. So I'm going to read off some courtship rituals. They started earlier, but it came to full fruition during the 1800s. And I got this off of PBS.org under the Real Rules of Courtship Dating in the Regency era. Starting off, friends and family needed to consent. That means if you were starting to date somebody, that whether you're a man or a woman, your family and friends had to consent to the match. So you couldn't just date whoever you wanted to in secret or anything like that. As the next part was, we'll get into that further. Refusal was a option, and women could decide between suitors. So if a bunch of guys came up to the woman, she could basically pick out which one she preferred. You can even see this in, I believe it was the Odyssey and other stories, even back as far as ancient Greece, where even a queen or princess or any number of people could actually choose between like, which guys they wanted the most. Chaperones were a shield protecting her reputation, her modesty, shield her from dangers of seduction, and protect her dowry against immoral men. So, if she was rich or she was well thought of, her or perhaps her family, and maybe the guy wanted to get some of that reputation rubbed off on him, or maybe there was like some kind of vendetta between the families, or he was just a bad guy. Because we do have players and people that take advantage of women even today. The chaperone was supposed to stop that. In fact, we still have chaperones today in like a lot of proms and such and dances where parents or other adults in the community can take part in it. So this tradition even carries on today. There were limits on conversation, chaste and polite. So you didn't talk about like what you were going to do to somebody sexually. You actually were very respectful in your speech towards somebody. Love letters. Men had to request them. Now, back in this time, they didn't have emails and a lot of stuff we have today. You get a love letter, it was actually supposed to be very forthright, again, polite and respectful, but it was also supposed to show caring, that you saw somebody as something different. It wasn't just something you was like, hey, how's it going, or something like that, like we do through texting and emails today. So, next one was courtship rituals. Now, we do have sometimes where people give gifts, but shows a difference between that society and what goes on today. The gifts would change over time, becoming more personal over time. So you weren't just trying to get the most expensive gift. You were actually trying to get something that might not have been worth much monetarily, but it was actually very, very personal to the person. Could be a promise ring. That was one option. Could it be a handkerchief or something like that? Something that the other person would show that you cared about who they were as a person. The minimum for the courtship ritual or dating was a few months, max was a few years. So men and women today wonder how long we should date until we get married. This give you a general idea. Bare minimum was a few months. So not just a month and it was over. It was longer than that. Courtship was broken off cleanly. Property as far as tokens and letters were returned. We kind of still do that today with the engagement ring. In most cases, there are some cases where someone still tries to keep an engagement ring, but generally, if it's like something really expensive or maybe with family heirloom, usually one party, particularly the guy who's supposed to give the engagement ring, actually asks for it back. So these are just some of the things. There are many cultures. I'm focusing mostly on Western culture. If you want me to go into the Bible and stuff like that, or expand it, that was just to give you an idea. But there's like this false narrative going on where a lot of people think, oh, I could I could prove how bad Western civilization is by showing all these bad examples. You're going to find almost bad examples in almost every culture. No culture is perfect because guess what? They're all human beings. So human beings screw up a lot. We are the product as a society of all the good and bad lessons that we learned over the years, where we're like, oh, this worked, this didn't. So before you start like just accepting like a false narrative or something that just sounds too one-sided, I suggest you actually do the research and look it up. I found this in like less than like a few minutes. I was surprised how easy access this was, especially given the false narrative. I was expecting to have to do a lot more research because I've been doing research over the years to find out like just half of what is going on here. I can go into like even a culture as bad as the Vikings, arguably one of the more brutal cultures considering they did involve themselves in slavery. But even in that society, if you were a wife, you had certain rights in that society. For example, if your husband didn't take care of you in an intimate way, or didn't take care of you as far as household, or take care of or protect or provide for his household, like if he left you destitute or anything like that, or started showing way too much attention to other women, then you could go to your community or whoever was the ruler of your area and basically call him out on it. And this would affect not just his general status, but his ability to move up in that society. He could actually lose a lot of like social status in that society for failing to keep up to his duties. It made him look very, very bad. And that's just one example of like how bad things could get if you just didn't do what you were supposed to do. Now, there are going to be some people who might watch this video and try to point out the bad examples, by all means. But again, I would say there were protections and there were trade-offs. So, there were a lot of protections back then that protected women. And this is just going up to the courtship. Now you go into the marriage, it goes even more, where we're, like generally speaking, women, when it comes to courtship and marriage, or I guess you could say relationships in general, do very well when it comes to before sex and after they get the ring. And Western society has developed a lot of protections to keep that going. One of the protections was before we did no fault divorce. So, unless the man could prove you were cheating or something like that, or you weren't just not living up to your vows, or you were harmful in the relationship, him divorcing you came with a big penalty. So it was in his own best interest to take care of you. Some people thought no fault divorce is a great idea. I personally think it's a freaking terrible idea. It basically makes something that should be, if not sacred, then at least looked highly on, because marriage is a very stable, is the most stable form of relationship, two-person marriage, and it helps children and therefore it helps society. But there was a trade-off. I'm not arguing there isn't. These measures also affected men. A man couldn't just go take out any woman. He had to actually get approval. And there's some of this stuff that carried over, but we've lost a lot of the protections that came with these things, and there was a price to pay. You can look at this and do more research and decide for yourself if that price was worth it. But I think it's kind of unfair to call all these former generations as like evil or abusers when actually the general rule was what you did to one gender, you generally did to the other. And if there was some kind of a difference between the two, it was because one gender, i.e., women, was generally more vulnerable than men. And in the cases where men got more rights, it usually came with a price on themselves, like going to war, where you can die on the front lines, which generally did not happen to women for most of our history. So I just thought you should hear some facts before you just accept the narrative. I find I'm finding more and more that a lot of people will just say stuff either because they think it's right or they just don't care to tell the truth. And I believe in telling the truth. So that's why I came out with this video. And I hope it convinces other people to do the research. If you want to prove me wrong, prove me wrong. And I'll argue with you. I love arguing by history as long as you're respectful. Anyway, Casey, y'all take care. Have a great night. Bye.